So listen to this. Back in 1994, Romário was on top of the world. Not only was he the star of the biggest team on the planet, but he had just carried Brazil on his own to the World Cup title. At that moment, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was by far the best player on the planet. Which was why the entire football world stopped spinning when mere months later, he announced that after only one full season at Barcelona, he was so bored of Europe that he wanted to go back to Brazil. You gotta realize, throughout all of these achievements, the guy was partying every night, pissing off Cruyff so much, he hired a private detective to sit by his house and take note of how late he was coming back home, only to end up realizing that he didn't. When he was done partying, he drove straight to training with no sleep. Matter of fact, when they asked him why he needed to go back to Brazil so bad, he just said, "I'd rather be happy than rich," which translated meant that he wanted one thing only, a nightclub clause that allowed him to party however, whenever he wanted. And the thing is, it was so good, only a few weeks later he was already signing with Flamengo, being transported from the airport to their stadium in a specially built car nicknamed the Romário Móvel, being escorted by the military as about 1 million people rushed to the streets to greet him like he was the goddamn Pope. Forget Neymar, Ronaldo or Ronaldinho, this was the greatest signing in the history of Brazilian football. Those three arrived when they were supposedly washed or past their best. Romário, on the other hand, well, 2 weeks after arriving, he was already flying back to Europe to be handed the FIFA World Player of the Year, racking up more votes than every other player on the planet put together. And let me tell you right now, just because he was months away from turning 30, that doesn't mean he was coming to Brazil to sit by the beach drinking coconut water. He was there to put every striker in the country to shame. This was Ronaldo before Ronaldo. This guy already had 306 goals to his name and then scored 438 more after turning 30. He went so hard that at 35 he was still arguably the best player on the planet. He had so much fun messing with Pelé's head that closing in on 40 years old with his hair turning grey, he came back from retirement to outscore every player in the league one final time and equal his unofficial record of 1,000 career goals. And the hilarious thing is that a lot of this might have never happened if it wasn't for the fact that his relationship with Flamengo would turn out to be so toxic that he set out to get revenge from them by any means necessary. Look, the moment Romário stepped onto that league, the first thing he did was warn Vasco supporters that they better bring tissues to the Maracanã because they will be crying a lot. Reminder, Vasco was his first ever club. This guy could not care less about anyone. 5 weeks later, he was already scoring a hat-trick in the final of the Carioca Championship's first stage to beat Botafogo 3-2, and the very next game, he was getting another hat-trick, at one point plucking the ball out of the sky and going past all three defenders plus the keeper before smacking it in. He was already on 20 goals, only 15 matches after his arrival. So, with the hype being out of this world and the press creating this whole marketing stunt where they claimed between Romário with Flamengo, Renato Gaúcho with Fluminense, Túlio Maravilha at Botafogo and Bigode with Vasco, whoever won the Carioca Championship would be named the King of Rio. Everyone expected Romário to claim his crown, but after getting into a fight with manager Vanderlei Luxemburgo, not only did Flamengo lose out on the title-deciding match against Fluminense by a single goal, but Romário also lost out on the top scorer award to Túlio Maravilha by a single goal as well. After that, it wasn't just that his own ego was hurt, the entire club was looking for redemption, so they brought in Edmundo right as the Brazilian Championship was about to start, claiming that alongside Romário and Savio they made up the best attacking trio in the world, but that was one move that just did not go according to plan, with Flamengo eventually finishing just 6 points off of relegation, which made no sense, especially once you realize that at the exact same time, they also made it to the final of the Supercopa Libertadores, a tournament where all the previous champions go head-to-head for the ultimate title, though despite Romário scoring in the final, they would lose that as well. By the turn of the year, everything had gotten so messy that even with Romário managing to finish 4th in the FIFA World Player of the Year, which is unheard of for anyone playing outside of Europe, his relationship with the board had gotten so sour, they forbid him from skipping practice, forced him to travel to matches in the team bus instead of using his helicopter, and pretty much fired his whole entourage of dedicated physios and personal trainers, eventually even being rumored that they were open open to offers from Europe, while they were also considering the signing of Bebeto, one of Romário's greatest ever rivals. At that point, Romário was already so pissed off, he came into the season with 26 goals in 19 matches, at one point scoring 5 in a single game to drag them to a 6-2 win, taking the top scorer award, as he led them through both stages of the Carioca Championship completely undefeated, obviously winning them both, and literally forcing them to cancel the final and just hand them the trophy, since that final was supposed to be played between the winners of those two stages. And worse, now that he was undoubtedly the king of Rio, you know what he did once Bebeto's signing was confirmed? He pretty much told them, "Weren't you gonna sell me? Well, now I'm out," and moved to Valencia, becoming the highest paid player in the world, though somehow things only got worse, launching him straight into the dark ages of his career. Only 5 matches in, even with 4 goals to his name, he was already turning the coach as well as the entire team against him, getting injured, negotiating a whole deal to move to Boca Juniors and play alongside Maradona, only to end up settling on a move back to Flamengo on loan, finding some way of being impressive enough when he did play that he was still in the top 10 of the FIFA World Player of the Year by January, then immediately proving that he did deserve it, putting up 35 goals in 36 games, sending him to the final of virtually every competition, scoring in every one of those finals, and somehow coming out trophyless regardless, as Ronaldo Phenomenal started a whole campaign to bring him out to Inter to play alongside him after the two partnered up to take the Copa America over summer. But instead, Romário was convinced by Valencia's new manager Valdano to make the same mistake all over again, going back to Spain at the end of his loan, balling out for a couple matches, getting injured again, watching Valdano get sacked after only 3 matches without him, and coming back to find Ranieri as his replacement, who immediately get in his face, complaining about his partying, telling him that, acting like this, you'll never be called up to the World Cup, to which Romário replied, "In my private life, I do what I want, whoever doesn't like that can get if I don't play here, I'll play in Brazil," then quickly going out with the national team to play in the Confederations Cup and scoring in every single match on their way to the final, where he scored a hat-trick to break the competition's all-time goal-scoring record and of course take the trophy, totaling 63 goals for club and country, pretty much giving Ranieri the greatest middle finger of all time before, again, forcing his way back to Flamengo. Look, at this point it was unsustainable. Again, Romário came in, dropped 35 goals in 40 matches, they went trophyless regardless, and somehow in the end, it was all his fault. So much so that after taking a minor knock in a training session with Brazil and repeatedly insisting he was okay, they used that as justification to leave him out of the World Cup squad, with some even coming out making claims that he was fat, to which he said, "The elephant is fat too, but if you set his tail on fire, no one can beat him in a race," which, in other words, meant that, as I said, Romário was pissed off. But that was nothing. After watching them lose out on the final of the World Cup and calling Zico, now the national team's director, a natural-born loser, Romário opened the year in phenomenal form, scoring some of the greatest goals of his life and scoring a lot of them as he made Flamengo Carioca champions once again, before deciding that was nowhere near enough to prove everyone wrong, instead going off at the Copa Mercosul, scoring against every team he faced, only for the president to terminate his contract right before the final, blaming it all on the fact that Romário had been spotted partying after a big defeat, as if that wasn't what he had always done, forcing him to watch from afar as his teammates were named South American champions, as every pundit in the country started claiming that he should just retire, setting him off more than ever, leading him to claim that, "I'm like money, people don't like to admit it, but everyone wants it," then quickly reaching a deal to join his first ever team Vasco Da Gama, supposedly just to play the Club World Cup that was to be hosted in Brazil, though it would end up being a little more than that. Now, it was truly about to shut everyone's mouths. Only one game into the tournament, their fans were already chanting that no one beats Vasco at the Maracanã, as they were about to go up against Man United's treble winners, with Ferguson having gone out of his way to claim that Romário and Edmundo were no longer what they used to be, and while Flamengo's fans set up banners in support of the English. So, they had no choice but to destroy them. 24 minutes in, they combined for the first. 2 minutes after that, Romário went around the keeper for the second. In a flash, they were 3 3 goals in front. Romário was so deadly that day that after that game, for the first time in his life, Gary Neville had to seek psychological help to get his confidence back up. He had completely broken him. It was such a legendary beatdown that to this day the Man United fans still chant about Vasco, and Romário didn't stop just yet. He scored the winner in the next game to put them in the final, and it was there that things blew out of proportion. With no goals for 120 minutes as they went up against country rivals Corinthians, Romário opened the shootout with a goal, only for Edmundo to send it over the bar, handing the trophy to their rivals. If at that point the two already hated each other, with Romário having a caricature of Edmundo painted in the bathroom stalls of his bar and Edmundo constantly protesting against his signing, then it all reached a whole new level when Romário publicly berated Edmundo for the penalty miss, before not only getting the club to sign him permanently, but getting them to give him the captain's armband after Edmundo went out injured, and then keeping it for good, setting up the greatest feud in Brazilian football history, with the two strikers going goal for goal side by side, with Romário opening things up by carrying them like never before at the Rio São Paulo tournament, scoring 4 against Palmeiras, 3 against Fluminense, 3 against São Paulo and 2 against Corinthians, still somehow losing the final despite putting up 12 goals in 10 games against the best teams in the country. It was already becoming evident who would win this race, and then Romário proceeded to put down 19 goals in 17 matches, even getting a hat-trick against Flamengo to win the first stage and put Vasco in the Carioca Championship's final, all while Edmundo got on TV complaining about Romário taking over penalty duty, claiming that the president's little prince gets everything he wants, only for the man himself to score a hat-trick the next game, surpassing Edmundo in the goal scorers table and replying that now everyone's happy, the king, the prince, and the clown, which, after Romário went out injured and they inevitably came out defeated in the final once again, led the board to send Edmundo out on loan. Romário had been balling out so hard that even the national team had started calling him up again, to which he went on to score 7 in his first 2 games back, locking his place in the team, getting back to Vasco and finding himself once more at the Copa Mercosul, ready to show Flamengo what he could do without them, scoring in every group stage match, then again against River Plate to reach the final against Palmeiras, where after scoring in its first leg, only to be forced into a third match tiebreaker, he found his team 3 goals behind with 30 minutes left on the clock, and not only proceeded to score twice and assist another to tie the game just as they went into injury time, but then killed it off, scoring their 4th to clinch the title without even needing to go into extra time, and hitting 11 goals in the competition, twice as much as any other player, traumatizing the Palmeiras fans to the point that to this day they refuse to talk about the 20th of December. After all, when Romário first landed in Brazil, he did warn them that the boogeyman is coming for you, and he wasn't about to stop chasing them. While all of this was going on, so was the Brazilian Championship, where, with Romário becoming the oldest ever player to top the goal-scoring charts, not only did he lead them to the final stage, but quite literally clutched every single round on their way to the final, scoring 2 more once there to take the title. 11 days out from his 35th birthday, Romário just closed out the highest goal-scoring year of his life, with 73 goals for club and country, 7 of them in tournament finals, not to mention 16 assists, which was wild coming from a guy who once claimed that he wouldn't even pass the ball to his own mother. He had hit such a ridiculous peak that even at that age, he took seemingly every award imaginable, from player to forward of the year, being named the top scorer of 6 different competitions, all out being named the South American Player of the Year as the crowd scattered behind him, demanding that he be named once more the best on the planet, only for his achievements to be disregarded completely, not even being nominated to the Ballon d'Or in a year where the competition was particularly weak, as even the winner Luis Figo went completely trophyless. Regardless, he had reached such notoriety that he had to once again reject Inter, who was offering to double his wages so that he would come and replace Ronaldo, who at the time was severely injured. Even the national team kept calling him up over and over again, as Romário somehow tied Rivaldo as their top scorer at the World Cup qualifiers, despite only playing 5 matches, while Rivaldo played 15. But believe it or not, midway through the next year, Romário would be forced to reject his call-up to the Copa America as he had an important eye surgery scheduled for that same month, though that procedure would eventually be delayed, forcing him to settle for playing some friendlies with Vasco while his teammates crashed out of the tournament to Honduras, leading Scolari to lose his mind, insisting that Romário had made up that entire story only to skip the tournament, since they both knew Brazil was resting all their star players and bringing in a weaker, younger squad, and all out promising the press that while he was manager, Romário would never be called up again. And indeed, despite reaching the day of that World Cup call-up with a tally of 131 goals in 145 matches for Vasco, as every top player and pundit demanded his call-up, he was left out of the World Cup, as Scolari publicly humiliated him, claiming that he was too old and that he only scores against the weakest teams. What good does it do scoring 4 against Bambala and Arimatea? What can he even do against a team like Argentina? Romário was so hurt, he literally cried on live TV begging Scolari to go back on his word, but nothing. Instead, he watched as his former apprentice Ronaldo made it back from injury in time to take his place, lead them to the trophy, and grab the Ballon d'Or. Over the next 3 years, Romário barely resembled himself. He joined Fluminense and kept dragging out things, playing at half throttle, even admitting that all I wanted was to reach 1,000 goals. Even his teammates hated him, as Fluminense had offered him a millionaire contract when they had 3 months of unpaid wages. It got so bad he slapped one of them in the middle of a game, and though the fans were strangely on his side, lifting up a banner asking him to slap the rest of the team as well, though he would almost drag them to the final of the Brazilian Championship by the next year, he was already living on loan to Qatar, where he was again humiliated, being sent back with the manager claiming that he is no longer in any condition to play professionally. By the time he made it back, it was to the point where he was getting into physical fights with supporters, and even if, again, he'd come in clutch, saving them from relegation, then, 38, and with a new manager 1 year younger than him, coming in and complaining publicly about him skipping practice, he infamously told the press that this guy has just stepped into the bus and he already wants to sit by the window, breaking down relations just as his contract ended, going almost 5 months without playing a game, as sources close to him claimed that he was about to announce his retirement. And here's where things get funny. I'm not saying that he came out of retirement because of Pelé, but the two never saw eye to eye ever since Romário claimed that he wanted to repeat his unofficial record of 1,000 goals, and that year, Pelé gleefully suggested on live TV that Romário should retire, to which he replied that everything that comes out of Pelé's mouth is shit, they should stick a shoe in it, it'd be better for him and for us. When he's quiet, he's like a poet, leading Pelé to hit back again saying that I'm a Catholic man and God always forgives the ignorant, so I always forgive Romário, which just sent him over the edge, closing down the back and forth by saying that if Pelé was as Catholic as he says, he would have acknowledged his illegitimate son, or at least gone to his funeral. As you may imagine, that was a step too far, but it also meant that Romário was forced to walk the walk, coming back from his supposed retirement to join Vasco one final time, now that he was on his way to his 40th birthday, refusing to play away matches because he didn't want to bother traveling that far for a match, only ever attending 11 out of the 21 away games that he was supposed to have been in, being so stubborn about tracking back that his own manager would make his team play 10 versus 11 in training in order to get them used to the fact that Romário was useless defensively, even going as far as missing the first 4 games of the Brazilian Championship to go out and represent Brazil at the Beach Soccer World Cup. And still, somehow, by the final match of the season, even with competitions such as a 21-year-old Carlos Tevez, it was 1 goal off of the top of the goal scorers table. And believe it or not, despite the fact that on that day, on 2 different occasions, he dribbled the keeper only to miss the open goal, he'd get a penalty, score, get another, miss it, and smack it in on the rebound, being forced to retake it because the keeper came off his line, and still scoring again to unbelievably come out of the Brazilian Championship championship as its top scorer, hitting 30 goals in all competitions, little more than a month before his 40th birthday, again, the oldest to ever do such a thing, quickly gloating to the cameras that all I did was break my own record. And honestly, after that, it kinda just went on tour, playing in the USA, in Australia, and always coming back to Vasco in between those loans, somehow still getting 44 goals in 60 matches right up to the age of 42, finally hitting 1,000 goals. And guess what Pelé had to say about that? He's a good student, huh? Did it all just like me, except I scored my 1,000th goal in a much bigger stadium, and that, well, then I also scored 282 more. These two just could not keep their mouths shut.